My name is Elena Martinez. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how my stepfather tried to erase my mother's memory by giving her most precious possessions to a stranger. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. My mother died on a Tuesday in March, breast cancer, stage 4. 8 months from diagnosis to the end. The kind of timeline that doesn't give you enough space to prepare but gives you just enough time to watch someone you love disappear piece by piece. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. My stepfather, Richard, stood at the foot of the bed, checking his phone. That image burned itself into my memory. My mom's fingers going cold in mine while he scrolled through emails, like he was waiting at a bus stop. The funeral was simple, the way she wanted it. White roses, her favorite hymn, a slideshow I put together from 30 years of photos. Richard gave the eulogy. He talked about how much she meant to him, how empty his life would be without her, how she was his soulmate. People cried. They squeezed his shoulder and told him he was so strong. I sat in the front row and felt nothing but cold. The week after we buried her, I moved back into my childhood home to help Richard sort through her things. That's what good daughters do, right? They show up. They pack boxes. They pretend the smell of their mother's perfume on her clothes doesn't make them want to scream. Richard had remarried my mom when I was 15. 2 years after my real father died in a car accident. Back then, he seemed nice enough, stable, a bit stiff maybe, but my mom seemed happy. And after everything we'd been through, that felt like enough. But as the years passed, I noticed things. The way he controlled the finances, even though my mom worked full-time as a nurse. The way he made decisions without asking her opinion. The way he'd cut her off mid-sentence at dinner parties to correct some small detail in her stories. My mom never complained. She was the kind of woman who believed in keeping peace, in making things work, in not airing dirty laundry. So I kept my mouth shut, too. Until I couldn't anymore. 3 days after the funeral, I was in my mother's closet, folding sweaters and trying not to break down when Richard walked in. He was holding something. A wooden jewelry box, the one my grandmother had given my mom when she turned 18. Dark cherry wood with brass hinges, about the size of a showbox. We need to talk about this, Richard said, setting it on the bed. I looked up from the pile of cardigans in my hands. Mom's jewelry box. Yes, he opened it, revealing the contents. My mother's wedding ring from my father. Her pearl necklace. The sapphire earrings she wore on special occasions. The silver bracelet I'd given her for Mother's Day when I was 12. My throat tightened. What about it? Richard cleared his throat. Jennifer and I have been talking, Jennifer. His new girlfriend. The woman he'd introduced to me exactly 3 weeks after my mother's diagnosis. The woman who'd started showing up at family dinners while my mom was still doing chemo. My hands clenched around the sweater. What does Jennifer have to do with mom's jewelry? Well, he said slowly, she's going to be my wife soon. We're getting married in June, and I think it makes sense for her to have these pieces. Your mother would have wanted them to stay in the family, and Jennifer will be family. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at him like he'd started speaking a language I didn't understand. You want to give mom's jewelry to your girlfriend? Fiancé, he corrected. And yes, it's the practical thing to do. These pieces are valuable. They shouldn't just sit in a box collecting dust. Jennifer will actually wear them, appreciate them. Something hot and sharp rose in my chest. Mom hasn't even been dead for 2 weeks. I know this is difficult, Richard said, his tone shifting into that patronizing softness. But we need to think practically. Your mother's gone. These are just objects. They don't bring her back, just objects. I looked down at the jewelry box, at the little silver bracelet with the heart charm. I remembered the day I gave it to her. How she'd cried and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. These aren't just objects to me, I said quietly. Richard sighed. Elena, I understand you're emotional right now. But you have to see this from my perspective. I'm trying to move forward. Jennifer makes me happy. Your mother would want me to be happy, would she? I wanted to ask. Would she really want you to hand over her most precious possessions to another woman? Before her grave even had grass growing on it? But I didn't say that, not yet. Instead, I asked, what if I want them? He blinked. What? The jewelry. What if I want to keep it? Richard's expression hardened. Elena, be reasonable. You're 28. You're not married. You don't have children. What are you going to do with your mother's wedding ring? Maybe I'll wear it on a chain. Or maybe I'll just keep it because it was hers, and she was my mother, she was my wife. For 13 years, I shot back. I was her daughter for 28. The air between us went cold. Richard closed the jewelry box with a soft click and picked it up, holding it against his chest. I'm not having this argument with you, he said. The jewelry belongs to me now. Everything your mother owned is legally mine. I don't need your permission, legally mine. The words hit like a slap. You're really going to do this? Yes, and if you can't respect that, then maybe you should finish packing and go home. He walked out, taking the jewelry box with him. I stood there surrounded by her clothes, her shoes, her scarves. All the pieces of her life that Richard was already dismantling. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about jewelry. This was about erasing her. And I couldn't let that happen. If your mother had just died and your stepfather wanted to give her most precious belongings to his new fiancée, would you walk away to keep the peace? Or would you fight for what was rightfully yours? That night, I didn't leave. I stayed in my childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over. Richard's words echoed in my head. Legally mine. Everything your mother owned is legally mine. Was that true? Could he really just take everything? Including the things that meant nothing to him but everything to me? I grabbed my laptop and started searching. Estate laws. Marital property. Inheritance rights. The more I read, the sicker I felt. In our state, when someone dies without a will, everything goes to the surviving spouse. My mother hadn't made a will. She'd been so focused on treatment, on fighting, on hoping she'd have more time, that she never planned for the worst. Which meant Richard was right. Legally, it was all his. But legality and morality aren't always the same thing. And I knew my mother. I knew what she would have wanted. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Then voices. Richard's deep rumble and a woman's higher, softer tone. Jennifer was here. In my mother's house. 2 weeks after the funeral. I pressed my ear to the door. She's just being difficult, Richard was saying. She doesn't understand that life goes on. I can't put everything on hold just because she's stuck in the past. Maybe you should give her some time, Jennifer replied. Her voice was gentle, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. She just lost her mom, I lost my wife. But you don't see me throwing tantrums over jewelry, a long pause. Then Jennifer said, about that. Are you sure it's a good idea? Giving me her things so soon? I don't want to cause problems. You're not causing problems, Elena is. And I'm not going to let her guilt me into keeping a dead woman's jewelry locked away forever. I pulled back from the door, my heart pounding. A dead woman. That's how he talked about my mother. Like she was ancient history. Like 13 years of marriage could be packed away as easily as her sweaters. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Jennifer sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee from my mother's favorite mug. The one that said world's best mom with my handprint on it from 2nd grade. She looked up when she saw me and something like guilt flickered across her face. Oh, good morning, Elena. I didn't know you were still here. I stared at the mug in her hands. That was my mom's. Jennifer glanced down, then quickly set it aside. I'm sorry. Richard said I could. It's fine. I poured myself coffee using a plain white mug and sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Jennifer was pretty. Blonde, early 30s, with the kind of smile that probably lit up rooms. She worked as a dental hygienist, which is where she'd met Richard during a routine cleaning. 6 months later, my mother got her diagnosis. 8 months after that, my mother was dead. The timeline made my stomach turn. I know this is awkward, Jennifer said finally. I wish we'd met under different circumstances. You mean circumstances where my mother wasn't dying? She flinched. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? Jennifer twisted her hands around the mug. Look, I know you probably hate me, I get it. But Richard and we really care about each other. And I'm not trying to replace your mom. I could never do that. Then why are you taking her jewelry? Her eyes widened. He told you about that? He told me he's giving you everything that mattered to her. So yeah, he told me. I didn't ask for it, Jennifer said quickly. Richard offered. He said he wanted me to have something special, something meaningful. I told him maybe it was too soon, but he insisted. I studied her face, trying to figure out if she was lying. But she looked genuinely uncomfortable, like she'd been caught in the middle of something she didn't fully understand. Do you even know what those pieces mean? I asked. The wedding ring was from my real father. The pearl necklace was from my grandmother. The bracelet was from me. Jennifer's face went pale. I didn't know all that. Of course you didn't, because Richard doesn't care about the meaning. He just cares about moving on. She opened her mouth to respond, but Richard walked in, already dressed in his work clothes. He kissed Jennifer on the cheek, grabbed his coffee, and barely glanced at me. Morning, he said flatly. Morning, I replied, matching his tone. He checked his watch. I have a meeting at 9. Jennifer, are you staying for breakfast? Actually, Jennifer said slowly, glancing between us, I think I should head home. I have an early shift. Richard frowned. You don't have to leave because of her. It's not. Jennifer stood, grabbing her purse. I just think maybe you two need to talk. Work things out. She squeezed Richard's hand, gave me an apologetic look, and left. The front door clicked shut behind her. Richard turned to me, his expression cold. Was that necessary? Was what necessary? Making her uncomfortable. She's trying to be part of this family. She's not family, I said. Not yet. And even when she is, she'll never be my mother. No one's asking her to be. Then why are you giving her mom's jewelry? Richard slammed his coffee mug down on the counter. Because it's mine to give. When are you going to accept that? Your mother is gone. I'm still here. I'm allowed to move forward with my life. 2 weeks, I said, my voice shaking. Mom's been dead for 2 weeks and you're already engaged to someone else. You're already giving away her things. Do you have any idea how that looks? I don't care how it looks, Richard snapped. I care about being happy. I spent 8 months watching your mother die. I earned the right to find joy again, earned the right. Like my mother's death was a debt he'd paid. Mom loved you, I said quietly. She believed you loved her, too. I did love her, then prove it. Keep her jewelry. Let me have it. Richard's expression didn't soften. No, that single word hung between us like a wall. Why? I asked. Why does Jennifer need them so badly? Because they're beautiful. Because they're valuable. And because they deserve to be worn by someone who's actually part of my life. I'm part of your life. I'm your stepdaughter. You're your mother's daughter, Richard corrected. And now that she's gone, there's no reason for you to keep inserting yourself into my business. The words cut deeper than I expected. Fine, I said, standing up. If that's how you feel. I headed toward the stairs, my mind racing. Richard had made his position clear. But something about the way he reacted, the way he rushed to move on, told me there was more to this story. And I was going to find out what. If someone made it clear they wanted you out of their life, would you walk away quietly? Or would you dig deeper to find out what they were really hiding? I spent the next 2 days going through my mother's belongings with new eyes. Not just sorting and packing, but searching. Looking for something, anything, that would explain Richard's rush to erase her from his life. In her nightstand drawer, beneath old prescription bottles and half-used lotions, I found a small leather-bound address book. The kind people don't use anymore because everything's stored in phones. I flipped through the pages. Most entries were outdated, friends from decades ago, relatives who'd moved or passed away. Then I saw a name that made me pause. Caroline Henderson. My mother's best friend from nursing school. They'd drifted apart over the years, especially after my mom married Richard. I remembered asking about Caroline once and my mom had gotten quiet. Said something vague about losing touch. I found Caroline's number in the book and stared at it for a long moment. What would I even say? Hi, you don't know me, but my mom just died and I think my stepfather is hiding something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Caroline might know something I didn't. I called. The phone rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered. Hello. Hi, is this Caroline Henderson? Yes, who's calling? My name is Elena Martinez. I'm Rosa Martinez's daughter. There was a sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, Rosa, I heard she passed. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I wanted to come to the funeral, but I didn't think Richard would want me there. That caught my attention. Why wouldn't he want you there? Caroline hesitated. That's a complicated question. How are you holding up? Honestly, not great. That's actually why I'm calling. I was hoping we could meet. There are some things about my mom, about her marriage to Richard, that I'm trying to understand. Another pause. Longer this time. Does Richard know you're calling me? No, good. Keep it that way. Her voice dropped lower. There's a coffee shop on Maple Street, the Daily Grind. Can you meet me there tomorrow morning? 10 o'clock. Yes, I'll be there, Elena, Caroline said, her tone serious. Your mother was one of the best people I ever knew. If you're looking for answers about Richard, I can help. But you need to be prepared. Some things, once you know them, you can't unknow. My grip tightened on the phone. I need to know the truth. Then I'll see you tomorrow. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. What had my mother kept from me? What had Richard done? The next morning, I told Richard the first was going out to run errands. He barely looked up from his laptop. The Daily Grind was a small corner cafe with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh espresso. I spotted Caroline immediately. She was in her early 50s, with short gray hair and kind eyes that lit up when she saw me. You look just like her, Caroline said, standing to hug me. Same eyes. Same stubborn chin. I smiled despite myself. That's what everyone says. We ordered coffee and sat at a corner table, away from the other customers. Caroline stirred her latte slowly, gathering her thoughts. Your mother and I met in nursing school, she began. We were roommates, best friends. We told each other everything. When she met your father, David, I was her maid of honor. When you were born, I was the first person she called after family. I remember you, I said. You used to come over for Sunday dinners. You brought me a stuffed elephant for my 10th birthday. Caroline's eyes glistened. Mr. Trunks, you named him on the spot. I still have him. She smiled, but it faded quickly. After David died, Rosa was devastated. She threw herself into work, into raising you. She was so strong, but I could see her struggling. When she met Richard 2 years later, I was happy for her. She deserved someone to lean on, but I prompted. But Richard wasn't what he seemed. Caroline leaned forward, her voice dropping. At first, everything was fine. He was charming, attentive, generous. But after they got married, things changed. He started controlling the money. Your mom made good money as a nurse, but Richard insisted on managing their finances. He said it was practical, that he was better with numbers. My stomach knotted. Mom never said anything. She wouldn't. Rosa hated conflict. She'd rather suffer in silence than make waves. Caroline took a sip of her coffee. About 5 years into their marriage, she called me crying. Said she'd tried to access their joint account and found out Richard had moved most of the money into his personal account. When she confronted him, he told her she was being paranoid, that he was protecting their assets. That's financial abuse, I said quietly. I told her the same thing. I begged her to see a lawyer to protect herself. But she said she didn't want to destroy her marriage over money. She said Richard loved her, that she was probably overreacting. Caroline's voice cracked. I pushed too hard. I told her she was making a mistake. We had a fight, and Richard found out I'd been encouraging her to leave. He told Rosa I was jealous, that I was trying to sabotage her happiness. She believed him, and you lost touch. She stopped returning my calls, stopped answering my texts. I tried for months, but eventually, I gave up. I figured maybe I really was wrong, maybe their marriage was fine and I just caused problems. Caroline wiped her eyes. Then 3 years ago, I ran into her at a grocery store. She looked so tired, Elena, so worn down. We talked for a few minutes and she apologized for cutting me out. Said she'd been confused, that Richard had helped her see things clearly. But you didn't believe her, no, because when Richard showed up to collect her, the way she straightened her shoulders, the way she stopped mid-sentence to check if he'd heard what she said, I knew. She wasn't happy. She was surviving. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. Why didn't she leave him? Fear, probably. Finances, definitely. By then, Richard controlled everything. If she'd left, she would have had to start over from nothing. And your mom, she wasn't a quitter. She believed in commitment, in working through problems. Caroline reached across the table and took my hand. When I heard about her diagnosis, I sent flowers to the hospital. Richard sent them back with a note saying Rosa didn't want to see me. I don't know if that was true or if he was still keeping us apart. He was keeping you apart. I said, my voice thick. Mom would never have turned you away. Not when she was dying. Caroline nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for her. I should have fought harder. It's not your fault. Richard made sure she was isolated. He made sure no one could help her. I took a shaky breath. Caroline, there's something else. Richard's engaged again. To a woman named Jennifer. He's giving her all of Mom's jewelry, the pieces that mean everything to me. He says it's his legal right. Caroline's expression hardened. Of course he is. That's exactly what he'd do. What do you mean? Richard doesn't see people, Elena. He sees assets. Your mother was an asset until she got sick and became a liability. Now Jennifer's the new asset, and he's investing in her. She squeezed my hand tighter. But here's something you should know. About 6 months before your mom got diagnosed, she called me just once. It was late at night and she sounded scared. Scared of what? She said she'd found something. Papers, documents, something that proved Richard had been hiding money from her for years. She said she was going to confront him, that she was finally going to stand up for herself. Caroline's voice dropped to barely a whisper. That was the last time I ever heard from her. 2 weeks later, she was diagnosed with cancer. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Are you saying? I'm not saying anything, Caroline interrupted gently. I'm just telling you what I know. What you do with that information is up to you. I sat back, my mind spinning. Documents. Hidden money. A diagnosis that came right after my mother threatened to expose him. It could all be coincidence. But it could also be something much darker. Do you think those documents still exist? I asked. If they do, Richard would have destroyed them by now. Unless what? Caroline met my eyes. Unless your mother hid them somewhere he'd never think to look. If you discovered your mother might have found proof of something terrible right before she got sick, would you let it go? Or would you search until you found the truth, no matter where it led? I left the coffee shop with Caroline's words echoing in my head. Unless your mother hid them somewhere he'd never think to look. Where would my mom hide something from Richard? Somewhere safe. Somewhere personal. Somewhere only I would think to check. I drove back to the house, my heart pounding. Richard's car wasn't in the driveway. Good, I had time. I went straight to my mother's craft room, a small space off the kitchen where she used to sew and scrapbook. Richard rarely went in there. He'd called her hobbies a waste of time. The room still smelled like her, lavender and fabric softener. I started searching through drawers, boxes, bins of old photos and craft supplies, nothing. Then I remembered something. When I was little, my mom kept a special sewing box, an old metal tin with roses painted on the lid. She called it her treasure box and told me she kept her most important things inside. I'd assumed she meant buttons and thread. I found the tin on the top shelf of her closet, behind stacks of fabric. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photos of my real father, letters he'd written to her before they got married, my baby bracelet from the hospital, and underneath everything a manila envelope. I pulled it out and opened it. Bank statements. Dozens of them. Accounts I'd never heard of, all in Richard's name only. Transfers of money, large amounts, moved from their joint account into his personal accounts over the course of years. Tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe more. There were also printouts of emails between Richard and someone named Marcus Chen, discussing investment properties my mother clearly knew nothing about. Real estate purchases made with money that should have been hers too. My mother had found proof. Proof that Richard had been stealing from her for years. At the bottom of the envelope was a handwritten note in my mother's careful script. Elena, if you're reading this, something happened to me. Don't let him take everything. These belong to you now. Fight for what's yours. I love you, Mom. My vision blurred with tears. She'd known. She'd known what Richard was, and she'd left me the evidence to prove it. I heard the front door open downstairs. Elena, Richard called out. Are you here? I quickly shoved the documents back into the envelope and tucked it under my jacket. My heart hammered as I stepped out of the craft room. Richard stood in the hallway, looking at me with suspicion. What were you doing in there? Just looking at Mom's old photos, I said, keeping my voice steady. Remembering, his eyes narrowed. You've been going through her things a lot. She was my mother. I'm allowed to miss her. Well, you should probably wrap that up. I'm having the estate sale company come next week. They'll take everything that's left. Everything? My stomach dropped. Even her personal things? I don't need any of it. And neither do you. He walked past me toward the kitchen. Oh, and Jennifer's coming over tonight. We're going to sort through the jewelry, decide what she'll wear to the wedding. Of course, he was moving forward like my mother had never existed. But now I had something he didn't know about. Something that could change everything. That evening, I met with a lawyer Caroline had recommended. I spread the documents across her desk and watched her expression shift from neutral to shocked. This is substantial, Attorney Mitchell said, flipping through the bank statements. If your mother was unaware of these transfers, this could constitute financial fraud. And if she was co-owner of the marital assets, you as her daughter might have grounds to challenge the estate distribution. Even though she didn't have a will? Even then, if we can prove Richard systematically hid assets and defrauded your mother, the court might rule that those assets should be part of the estate, split between him and your mother's heirs. That's you, hope flickered in my chest. What about the jewelry? The jewelry might be considered a gift to your mother from her first husband, which would make it separate property, not marital property. If we can establish that, it should go to you, not Richard. How long will this take? Could be months, maybe longer. And Richard will fight back hard. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my mother's note. Fight for what's yours. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The next morning, I filed a petition with the probate court challenging the estate distribution. By noon, Richard had been served with papers. By evening, he was at my door, his face red with rage. You're suing me? He shouted. After everything I've done for you? No, I said calmly. I'm fighting for what Mom wanted. What she deserved. What you stole from her. His expression changed. Fear flickered behind his anger. You don't know what you're talking about. I found the documents, Richard. The bank statements. The emails. Mom left them for me. The color drained from his face. That's impossible. I looked everywhere. You looked everywhere you thought to look. But you never understood her, did you? You never knew her at all. Richard stepped back, his jaw working. This won't change anything. I'll fight you, good, I said. Because I'm not backing down. I closed the door in his face, my hands shaking but my resolve solid. If someone had stolen from your mother for years and tried to erase her memory, would you let them win? Or would you fight with everything you had to make sure justice was served? The court battle lasted for months. For months of depositions, document reviews, and Richard's lawyers trying to paint me as a greedy daughter, trying to steal from a grieving widower. But the evidence didn't lie. The bank statements showed systematic transfers of money from joint accounts to Richard's personal accounts. Over $200,000 moved without my mother's knowledge or consent. The emails proved he'd bought investment properties using marital funds and put them solely in his name. Attorney Mitchell was relentless. She deposed Richard's accountant, his financial advisor, even Jennifer, who admitted under oath that Richard had told her he'd handled the finances without my mother's involvement. The turning point came when we presented my mother's handwritten note. The judge read it silently, then looked at Richard with an expression that made him shrink in his seat. "Mr. Carter," the judge said, "did your wife know about these accounts?" Richard's lawyer started to object, but the judge held up her hand. "I'm asking Mr. Carter directly." Richard cleared his throat. She knew we had investments. She trusted me to manage them. That's not what I asked." "Did she know about these specific accounts and transfers?" Silence. "No," Richard finally admitted. "She didn't know the details," the judge made a note, "because you deliberately hid them from her." 2 weeks later, the ruling came down. The judge found that Richard had engaged in financial misconduct during the marriage. The hidden assets were to be divided equally, with my mother's half going to her estate, which meant me. But there was more. The jewelry. The judge ruled that since the wedding ring, pearl necklace, and several other pieces had been gifts to my mother from her first husband and family members, they were separate property, not marital assets. They belonged to me as my mother's sole heir. Richard was ordered to return all of my mother's personal jewelry within 7 days. When I left the courthouse, Caroline was waiting outside. She hugged me tight. "Your mom would be so proud of you," she whispered. "I wish she was here to see it." "She is, sweetheart. She is." The day Richard returned the jewelry, he didn't come himself. He sent his lawyer with the wooden box. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling. Everything was there. The wedding ring, the pearls, the sapphire earrings, the silver bracelet with the heart charm. I held the bracelet up to the light, remembering the day I'd given it to her. Remembering her smile. Remembering how she'd worn it every single day, even when it didn't match her outfit. Because it reminded her that I loved her. "I fought for you, Mom," I whispered. "I didn't let him erase you." A week later, I heard through Caroline that Richard and Jennifer had postponed their wedding indefinitely. The financial settlement had hit him hard. And apparently Jennifer wasn't interested in marrying a man who was suddenly much less wealthy than she'd thought. I couldn't say I felt sorry for him. I moved out of town 6 months later. Started fresh in a new city with a new job, carrying my mother's jewelry box with me. I wear the pearl necklace on special occasions. The bracelet never leaves my wrist. The wedding ring hangs on a chain around my neck, close to my heart. Sometimes people ask about the jewelry, comment on how beautiful the pieces are. I always smile and tell them the same thing. They belong to my mother. She left them to me because she knew I'd protect them. She knew I'd fight for what mattered. Looking back, I realized the jewelry was never really about the monetary value or even the sentimental attachment. It was about refusing to let someone rewrite my mother's story. It was about making sure her memory stayed alive, stayed true, stayed mine. Richard thought he could erase her by giving away her things, by moving on like she'd never existed. But he was wrong. My mother's legacy wasn't in the objects she left behind. It was in the strength she'd given me to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. She taught me that some things are worth fighting for, that truth matters, that love doesn't disappear just because someone wants to forget it. And in the end, that was the greatest gift she could have given me. So here's what I learned. When someone tries to take what's yours, whether it's jewelry, money, or memory itself, you have two choices. You can let them win to keep the peace, or you can stand your ground and fight for what matters. I chose to fight. And I'd make that choice again, every single time. Family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about showing up. It's about protecting the people you love, even after they're gone. It's about making sure their story is told the way it deserves to be told. My mother loved me enough to leave me the truth. The least I could do was honor that love by refusing to let it be buried. If you were in my position, facing someone who wanted to erase your parents' memory, would you walk away? Or would you fight with everything you had to make sure they were never forgotten? Because sometimes the greatest act of love is simply refusing to let go.